Hello and welcome to the Believe Show. Today we are here with Angela Duckworth. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Zanyan. It's good to be here with you.
You as well. I'm going to tell people three things about you. Angela cares about kids. She cares about behavior change, really cares about behavior change, which I think is super cool. And her name is somewhat synonymous with grit. And now I'm going to tell you two personal things. I've known Angela, I don't even know, like 15, 20
I
years.
was
So
trying to
it's
count. I was like,
really
how many years? Definitely more than 10. I think you're right. It's about
a long
15.
time. And second personal thing is Angela introduced me kind of indirectly to my daughter's piano teacher, who my daughter loves. So that was a
Who
nice
is the
thing.
world's best piano teacher, if you want to
That's
know,
right.
and if you
That's
live
right.
in Pasadena?
Or Zoom, right? Because we don't. So Zoom. So
Oh
Cindy
my
Lamb,
gosh!
we never met her. Exactly. That's so funny. With the Belief Show, Angela, what is it that you believe that other people may not believe?
I don't believe in personality types. Like, I am an ENFP, but I don't believe in ENFPs or INTJs, which is what my husband
So,
is. But I don't believe in personality types.
so that probably means you totally don't believe in astrology.
I also do not believe in astrology, and I do not think personality types. I know I've immediately offended the many, many true believers of the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator and, the Enneagram and, other typologies. But so I don't think they have no information in them, but I don't believe in them. I have some concerns, and I don't think everybody would agree with me, but I don't love them.
What about something like strengths, a strength survey, like the VIA strength survey? Do you believe that that represents a person, or do you not? Because that's sort of on either direction.
Yeah, like the VIA strengths and there's a Gallup strengths finder and so forth. It's not that I don't believe people have strengths, and it's not that I don't believe that people have personalities or have character. Um, I think we do differ from each other in meaningful ways, and I think we can describe our best friend to someone we don't know and say like, oh my gosh, she's like a ball of energy. She's on the go all the time. I love how creative she is. Like, it's not like we can't say those things and have them mean something. And the VIA, like these other inventories, also can be very useful. I think what I don't love about types, like I'm a type 3, what type are you? Like, I'm an ENFP, what type are you? Is that they communicate. I guess that there are two things that I don't love about them. One is that like it suggests that you're either an E or you're an I. You're either a 3 or you're a 7. How do 7s talk to 3s, right? Like, are you type A? Like, is that your personality type? This fondness we have for putting people into little shoeboxes of like, I think is itself super interesting, and I think I have an understanding. I have a guess as to why we do that. But the nature of human nature is that in almost every way, human beings differ more on a continuum. So rather than saying like, I'm an E, oh, really? I'm an I, it's more accurate, but a lot more cumbersome to say that on the continuum of extroversion, introversion, like, I probably fall into the 55th percentile. What about you? Like, oh, I'm in the 26th percentile. And there's more nuance than that, but I'll just say that that's one of the reasons I don't like types. The other reason I don't love these particular types is that I'm not sure they cut nature at its joints. It's like I've taken other personality tests like the PI. It's called like the performance indicator or something, and it's a lovely UX. Like, it's a fun test to take, and it gives you this like readout, and it feels very scientific. But it's like 4 random dimensions. I'm like, why are you like, what? Like, why are you assessing these 4 random dimensions?
So given that you are not a fan of types, what any of these kinds of types that come about by assessments, what do you like in place of them?
Well, I think that before I like completely, throw out types as these like, there's a reason. The psychology of personality is interesting, but so is the psychology of personality tests. And I think so many of us know that we're an ENFP or an INFP or an INTJ because guess what? Nobody's going to remember that they're 55th percentile on the introversion extroversion continuum. It's too hard. So we like types. It's like, we use these labels partly because they vastly simplify the information. That's also what I don't like about them, right? So I'm just saying that, like, there's a good psychological reason why people are attracted to types. They're memorable, they're easy, and we can kind of use them for, like, oh, if they're an extrovert, do this, but if they're an introvert, do that. So we can, like, make little rules with types. But in place of them, I would love a more um, nuanced. I mean, I would like people to at least know, even if they're going to say, like, I am, an ENFP, like, at least to know that that is just a kind of simplification of, like, oh, on the continua of these 4 dimensions, I was, like, more to the right than to the left on this, and this.
So let me try to dissect if it's one of or two of these things. Is it that you prefer that people understand that it's not so binary? So that's one thing that I'm hearing you say. And the other is that, even, let's say introvert, extrovert, that even if I am more introverted than I am extroverted in terms of where I get my energy, there's probably a little bit of integrative thinking where I will understand a little more of this or that if I see myself as not one or the other. Are you saying both of these things? Are you saying one more than the other?
I mean, I think I'm saying mostly number one. It's just like I would, like, even things like, you wouldn't think, like, but schizophrenia is more of a continuum than it is like you either are or aren't. I mean, most of us think, like, I'm not schizophrenic, but some people are, and they don't think, like, you can be a little schizophrenic, which you
This is great.
can.
This is what's going to happen. We're going to walk away from the show with everybody just wondering, where am I?
How schizophrenic I am. You're somewhere on the continuum. I actually think the nice thing about this is that, in some ways, it like makes you realize, like, say, for example, ADHD. I've met so many adults who tell me, like, oh, I have ADHD. And I don't know that people think of it as a continuum, right? Like, I think when somebody says that to me, I think, oh, when it comes to impulse control, attentional control, executive function, this person is on the lower end of a continuum. But I don't think that this person is, in qualitative and categorical ways, different from me. I think they struggle more with this thing. And I think that's helpful, especially because, that's, humbling or whatever. It's just more human to understand that we're all differing on these continuum. Charlie Munger, who's, I think, approaching 100, I don't know, maybe he's like 97, has said that, like, really and he's not the only person who said this. I think George Orwell, a lot of people have said that, like, like the point of having a human mind is to be able to hold things in contradiction at the same time, so that you can, like, wrestle with them, like, understand the deeper truth. So I would like people who have an interest in personality, which is why we take these tests, to get to, like, a deeper level of nuance, to say, like, personality is a little more complicated than types, and we differ from each other, but we mostly differ in the degree to which we do or don't behave a certain way, not like either we do or we don't.
Got it. So you're just saying people can understand the world a bit better and have more interesting thoughts if they see that all of this on a continuum.
Yes, and if people still have, like, appetite for nuance and complexity, I would say not only do extroverts and introverts differ on a continuum, and you're right, by the way, that a lot of this is, like, how much energy you get from different kinds of situations. Like, do you get more energy from being with people, or do you find that totally depleting? But also, take the same person. Let's take me, right? I'm actually very high on extroversion. Notice that I didn't say, like, I'm an extrovert. I just said I'm very high in extroversion, right? But there's a lot of times where, like, I don't really want to be with anybody. And if people can have an appetite for complexity, I'll say, here's the other thing about personality that I don't think a lot of people believe, but which is true, which is that an extrovert can, in some circumstances, be more introverted than an introverted person. In other words, like, we are complex creatures, and all it means to have a personality trait or a character strength is that there's kind of a center of gravity to where you are, But actually understanding that somebody like me, who you probably think of me as more of an extroverted person, like, on a Saturday, I think if you just measure the number of words spoken in our house, I think I speak the least in my whole family of 4. So that might surprise you. And like, you only see me on podcasts and you don't see me like just on a quiet Saturday afternoon. So there's a lot of variation even within a person.
Right. I was also, when I first started learning about psychology and heard about the gene environment interaction, for me, that was shocking that in some situations you might have more of an extroverted tendency and in some you might have less.
Yeah, there's this really great psychologist named Will Fleeson, and he has these like graphs that show that, for example, when you just measure how much variability there is of the same person, Angela on a Saturday, Angela on a podcast on a Friday, Angela first thing in the morning, Angela at a party, whatever, like there is more variation within a person than there is actually between people. And the 16th century French philosopher Michel de Montaigne put it this way: I am more unlike myself than I am unlike other men. So like we're complex, or Walt Whitman, like I am large, I contain multitudes. And I think again, like, this level of complexity that like not a lot of people are like, hey, please give me the complex truths about. It's not like a TED talk, right? Like I think it's helpful, to like appreciate how, we all also have something in common. I mean, even if you're the highest as there is on an extroversion scale or the lowest and being like the most introverted, there's a lot of overlap in the kinds of behaviors that we have. And I think that's useful to remember as our country seems to be like, splitting apart. It's nice to know that there's some things that we have in common. All of us have an introvert in ourselves. All of us have an extrovert in ourselves. All of us have courage. All of us are scared. There's a lot of overlap.
Curiosity. One of the people who's with us today, Eileen, says she so agrees and she has concerns when people box themselves into a type, just that it can be limiting.
Yeah, I mean, my parents, who immigrated to the United States from China, would say that from their cultural tradition, they would say like there is no good without a bad. There's like things are complicated. And I will say about these types is like there's lots of good things to say, but they're memorable. Some people also would say, in addition to them being memorable, like to remember your type, that it would also say like some people would say like it's very affirming of their positive identity, like to walk around the world and say like, I'm a generous person, like that's the kind of person I am, can have an upside. But I just want to point out there are some drawbacks to that, like simplification and that category, the shoeboxing, because then you're like, I'm an introvert. Like introverts don't go like whitewater rafting. And then you, as Eileen is saying, it's like, you limit yourself unnecessarily.
Yeah, I had a really funny interaction. We did at MBTI when in business school years and years ago, but I was 50-50 on 2 of the dimensions. So I always felt like I was reporting blank something. So it was just always funny to think about it. So then when all this controversy came out about MBTI and that you're really choosing binary when it might be 51%, it's funny.
Yeah, and again, like I also at the same time as a psychologist, I'm fascinated at the obvious. I mean, the market, supply and demand, the fact that business schools, McKinsey, companies everywhere use the MBTI. It's probably the most used personality test in the world.
Where did you do it first?
I did it at McKinsey, and I remember taking it, and they were like, you got a 0 for thinking. I think you scored this wrong. And I was like, oh. And they were like, no, you scored it right. You are 0 for thinking, but I guess you have a lot of feeling. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like me. But again, that's nuanced, right? Like, turns out I became a professor. And actually, I do like to think, and I think I like to think a lot when I was at McKinsey too. So the categorization has its upside and it has its downside. And my hope in this 2021 year that we're in, like, and how it's different from like the way my mom and dad and their parents grew up, is that because we have so much more psychological literacy, in large part through efforts like yours, right? Like people are so much more sophisticated about motivation and emotion and our biases and where they come from, and like, oh my gosh, so think about what your grandparents knew compared to what about how people tick. Like I feel like we can be the generation that starts to get more nuanced and complex, and we don't have to have these like completely oversimplified views. And do I think the VIA is good? I think the VIA is really great. Is it helpful to remember your signature strengths? Sure. But now that you're so psychologically literate, can you also remember that your strengths are just like, centers of gravity on a continuum, and, like they're not like either or.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting when you bring up what people before us knew and what we know, because I wonder whether, so one of the things that came to mind when you said that is we probably have less conflict now, just literally person to person, because we know some ways of resolving conflict, of thinking about, of speaking about. And it fits for me, that idea fits for me with this more non-binary or just a very continuum way of thinking.
I think you're acquainted with Steven Pinker's thesis, and maybe have you yet interviewed Steven Pinker on his, the grand sweep of human history? So for those who don't know this well yet, Steven Pinker at Harvard has this theory, provocative, I think actually fairly well substantiated. So I'll just come out and say, I think largely he's right, that when you look at the history of civilization, not over the last 10 years, but over the last, 10 centuries, then you can really see a progression towards a more just, humane world. Like, we are less likely to murder each other and steal each other's stuff and take the bread off each other's table than 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, or 500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. So we've become he calls it the better angels of our nature, or that's one of his book titles. And I think this empathy that we have for each other, and this kind of, more sophisticated way of understanding ourselves and other people. And yes, exactly right. Like, better ways of resolving conflict than like clubbing each other over the head. I think that's true. Also, just even within our own lifetime, I think of how incredibly emotional, impulsive, hot-tempered I was when I was, I don't know, 21, right? I'm 51 now. Like, I'm still emotional, impulsive, and hot-tempered, but a lot better. Like, so much better, thank God. And I wouldn't go back to my 20s for anything. Even though like lots of things were working better when I was 21, but it's because of this like increasingly sophisticated way of managing myself and understanding myself and others.
So tell me this in the context of this, that you're coming out, I don't believe in personality types. I want people to think more of a continuum. How can people balance both their desire to, I don't even know, Angela, whether to call it to think in types or to box, their desire to box, but also their desire to be more whole-brained about this?
It's the right question. I'm not sure what the right answer is. I mean, I wrote a "This I Believe" essay. This is this essay prompt that National Public Radio built a whole show around. Now decades and decades ago, it's not even on the air anymore, but you can still Google it, and they have a website that they maintain. And lots of famous people have written "This I Believe" essays, and lots of less famous people have, and they all begin "This I Believe," and from there, it's yours to fill in. And I assigned this for homework in my undergraduate class, and I do all the same assignments that my students do. So I wrote mine too, and I wondered what would happen. I thought it was going to be "This I Believe," "This I Believe, I believe in grit," and I was like, but that's not what came out. I was like, "This I believe in." And then I was like, generosity. And then I wrote an essay about my mom, which I hadn't planned to, but like it was just about my mom and how my mom gave away, our birthday gifts the week after, and my sister's stuffed animal collection. And it didn't even occur to her that this would be problematic, which it was in the short term, but that she's just the most generous person and that I believe in generosity. Now, is that a type? Like, do I think of myself as a generous person? I don't even know if I think of myself as, but I know that it's a value that I have. And it is categorical in the sense that it's not categorical. Anyway, there's a word, generosity. So I will say this. I often think of myself as my mother's daughter. Like, if somebody says something critical to me, and my first reaction is to be defensive and to kind of attack back, like, your research is terrible. Like, it's like, being human, I'm like, no, it's not. You're terrible. And whenever I'm kind, whenever I, say a generous thing, I literally say to myself, I am my mother's daughter, and because I am my mother's daughter, like, I will see the good in you and I will breathe more and I will not be mean. Like, I will not be a mean person because I am my mother's daughter. So I don't know if that says like do or don't believe in categories, but I think writing that essay is a great homework assignment. And I do think sometimes we can have ideals and want to approach them, and little phrases that we use in our conversations with ourselves that remind us of where we're trying to go.
So ideals, values, beliefs, we can use that to focus on instead of these categorical types.
And quotes. I love quotes. I love quotes. I was remembering, do you know the poem, I think, well, Nature's First Green is Gold by Robert Frost. Do you know this poem?
No, I don't know that
Like,
one before.
I'm actually not that literary, but I remember the movie The Outsiders, which was a great movie with Matt Dillon and lots of other heartthrobs. And I remember also reading the book, and the poem by Robert Frost is like in this teen novel / teen heartthrob movie, but it goes like, nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold, her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. So you can remember a poem like that because you saw it in a movie theater when you were 14 years old and going through puberty. And you can think to yourself about this poem when you're on a run, when you're 51 years old. And you can say, like, you know what? Life is fleeting and youth is very quick. And like, this is a reminder to like do something with my life that's useful. So I do believe in like committing things to memory and like, like these, but I personally, I don't find it useful to go on my run and think like, well, I'm an ENFP, like, like what would an ENFP do?
That might not be a very fun run.
Yeah, I know. I'd turn around and come home, take a shower.
Thank you so much. 2 ending questions. One is for the people who have been watching with us and who have followed this thesis. What is a takeaway thought that you would like to leave everybody with?
Yeah, I would say that when you think of yourself, of course, you're going to be able to describe yourself in a few adjectives. But one takeaway is to recognize that those are not either or. So they're continua, not categories. And the second one is to realize that you are more unlike yourself than you are unlike other people. And we all contain multitudes. We're complicated. And when we see other people and we try to relate to them, and their behavior is a little frustrating or maybe the opposite, like, we can accommodate that. They're people, they contain multitudes too.
Thank you. And the last question, if you could snap your fingers, and almost everyone in the world were to take some action, what action would you want that to be?
Well, it's on my mind right now, which is the gratitude exercise that you know so well, that has been studied by science so much to make people happier. One thing that has not been studied as much is that it makes other people happier too, like the person who is on the receiving end of your gratitude. So if before the sun sets today, you could thank one person for anything you want to thank them for, that would make me very grateful.
Awesome. Angela, thank you so much. Thank you. All the best.
I look forward to the next 15 years of our friendship.
Same here.
I'll be here. Stick around for it.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Bye.